Peter here with Pocket Entertainment, and I'm here with Trevor. And why don't you tell us a little bit about what your company does, Trevor?
So Reading with Pictures is a non-profit organization getting comics into classrooms. And the idea is that the non-profit wanted to create a proof of concept by putting together an anthology that collects 37 stories from award-winning creative teams, puts them together. They're all ages appropriate. They all have a little bit of educational content in there and kind of a fun adventure story to go along with them. We've got top-tier talent in there like Fred Van Lente, Chris Russo, Raina Telgemeier is a New York Times best-selling novelist. Jill Thompson does our cover. And yeah, just a lot of really great stories in there with an eclectic mix of different subject matters, different stories that people can relate to that kind of garner within that K-12 environment.
Now, what level of success have you been having? Because as a music teacher, I've noticed that reading lately is a very cross-curricular subject, and it's almost to the point where if you teach, no matter what you teach, you have to teach some reading. So, so what kind of success and success stories, even if you can provide a specific example of how it's really worked, maybe?
Yeah, and so on a classroom-by-classroom basis, this has really kind of been adopted. A lot of the hurdles that teachers tend to encounter is that the teacher recognizes that this could be a great tool for them to use in an educational environment. It tends to be like the principals and the district administrators that need a justification for it, right? And so one of the hurdles that we run into is that as a proof of concept book, Volume 1 wasn't necessarily something that they would adhere to because they have to adhere to a national curriculum standard. So to overcome this, as of 2 days ago, we announced the graphic textbook, which is Reading with Pictures 2.0. And that volume will actually adhere to national curriculum standards for grades 3 through 6 in 4 subject areas: math, science, English, and social studies. And so there'll be a variety of stories in there, again, that'll kind of appeal to those readers with an all-ages appropriate story, and it will adhere to those national standards now, which helps to overcome that hurdle. On a classroom-by-classroom basis, we've seen a lot of success from teachers, and in fact, we just relaunched our website, readingwithpictures.org, that allows a resource for teachers to put up curriculum guides, as well as any case studies that they do have, so that they can share those with each other and kind of showcase off what's worked, what kind of obstacles they've encountered, and how they've overcome those hurdles. On a personal level, I've even encountered a couple of situations with comics helping young readers learn how to read. One of my friends married into a relationship, and her husband had a 10-year-old son who was reading at 2 grade levels below his current grade, and he was very obsessed with Pokemon video games. And kids are mean, right? Like, they understand and they know when you're not reading at your age level, and they call him names, and that doesn't encourage you to read more, that encourages you to regress more and play your DS a little bit more often. She got really frustrated. She didn't know how to reach out to this kid and get him to read. And so one of the things that I recommended was, well, have you tried buying him a Pokemon graphic novel? He likes Pokemon, you know, and suddenly he starts engaging with content that he's already interested in, characters that he already knows, and that suddenly from that graphic novel he transitions into reading, you know, some of the chapter books for early readers, and then finds a couple of other subject matters that he likes, and within the span of about a year and a half, he bridges that gap between the 2 age grades, or the 2 grade levels that he was missing, and caught back up to the rest of his peers. So I'm not going to necessarily sit there and say that he's going to be, you know, the exception to the rule on there, but I will encourage reading across the board and say that, you know, the reading is definitely helping him both socially and academically.
Yeah, that's a great story. What other kinds of content besides, you mentioned Pokemon, so what kind of other content have you put in the books to engage young readers?
So in the Reading with Pictures Volume 1 that we have on there, we cover a variety of subjects in there, from astronomy, deep sea exploration. There are a couple about science. One of my favorites is a math story called Mail Order Ninja. And it's about a boy who orders a ninja in a mail order catalog and brings him to school. The school gets attacked by a giant rampaging gorilla named Genghis Khan and his Kublai Khan empire. And so to overcome this, one of the nerdy science kids points out the fact that according to Galileo's squared cube law, as mass increases at one rate, size and height increase at another. Genghis Khan could technically not support his own weight, and suddenly upon that realization, like in a Looney Tunes cartoon, he succumbs to gravity and plummets over, and they save the day. And in the book they actually showcase the bar chart showing how Galileo's squared cube law works, but instead of using a bar, they use a monkey. You know, they use Genghis Khan. So mathematics has been utilized, you know, in a visual format specifically, and they use word puzzles all the time. Why couldn't you create a word puzzle visually with a graphic novel? Yeah. Likewise, in English class, some of the things that you tend to learn on a regular basis are like Shakespeare. Right. But when you learn about Shakespeare in English class, you read the script. Yeah. Well, the script of Shakespeare was only ever meant to be read by thespians and art directors. It was never meant to be read by the general public. Shakespeare was meant to be seen. Could you take Shakespeare, visually translate it into a comic book form and put all of the dialogue, narration, and everything in there? You're still getting the educational content that you would get from reading the script, but the visual interpretation that it was always intended to be seen. So there are a lot of applications that you could utilize comic books for in a classroom, and a lot of benefits for it. Josh Elder, our founder, also likes to do a case study, and if you go to our website, readingwithpictures.org, he does this in the Origins of Reading with Pictures video on there for the CUSP International Summit that he was at. And he essentially breaks the room into two halves and says, I'm about to show you a story. It'll be a 3-panel story of a father and son playing football in their backyard. Panel 1 has the father getting ready to throw the football, and he says, "Go long, son." Panel 2 has the football in the air and the son is chasing it, and panel 3 has the son catching the ball and the dad saying, "Good job, son." Very simple 3-act story, right? Yeah. Half of the room has to read those 3 panels in a comic book. Half of the room has to read that very same story written out in prose narrative. Right. Raise your hand when you're done. And immediately the comic book half raises their hand, because you can take in complex information visually faster than you can through just straight narrative text. And narrative text is something that you have to teach people how to do, whereas a visual language is more universal. I show you what an apple is. You know what that is, regardless of what language you speak, English, Spanish, Chinese. Whether you even know language at all, if you're an infant, you can typically identify an apple depending on the age that you get to. Yeah. It's only as we start applying symbols and meanings to those symbols, letters, and have them form up to words, that apple suddenly becomes A-P-P-L-E, right? Yeah, and so it's kind of interesting that we've applied that the language is more important than the visual, when we can take in that visual a lot faster, take in a lot more information a lot quicker, you know, and apply that in an academic setting. Yeah,
that's great. Well, Trevor, thanks for your time. Enjoyed talking with you.
Yeah.
Thank you.